Ladies and gentlemen, in just a moment you are going to hear the voice of a man who will tell you some tremendously important facts.
Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I am so excited. I have a wonderful guest today, Dr. Anne Berube. She has written an amazing book, The Burnout Antidote. It is written for us. We talk about service all the time, but there is consequence to service, and there's some underlying issues that we go through in our journey towards being of service, and that's burnout. And I felt as I read this amazing book that Dr. Bérubé wrote, it was written for me. It addressed a number of powerful issues that I've gone through in my journey of being of service. And so I can't wait to share some of her teachings, and you got to get this wonderful book. Welcome to the Reality Revolution, Dr. Bérubé.
Thank you so much, Brian, for having me. I'm so happy to be here with you in conversation.
Thank you so much. Dr. Bérubé is a spiritual teacher with an uncommon ability to share her story and insights in a way that awakens the inner wisdom in others. She helps people free themselves from societal and parental conditioning that is holding them back from realizing the highest calling of their soul. Her work has allowed her to share the stage with renowned self-help luminaries, including best-selling authors Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra, Elizabeth Gilbert, Sir Ken Robinson, Julie Donock, Anita Moorjani, Gabrielle Bernstein, and Greg Braden. You can learn more about Anne at her website, ANNEBERUBE.com. Dr. Berube's wonderful book talks about burning out. This is a phenomenon that happens for all of us in many areas of our life, but in particular, Dr. Berube's book addresses it in regards to service and our core essence. So let's start off a little bit. And before we get into the book, tell us a little bit more about your spiritual journey and what brought you to this point.
Oh, thank you for that great introduction, Brian. So about 22 years ago, I had a car accident and I had a near-death experience. I was coming back from golfing with friends, and I don't like golfing, by the way. I just went because that's what we did back then. And so my boyfriend at the time took a left turn into oncoming traffic, and a half-ton truck hit the car that we were in. And on the impact, my liver lacerated and my lungs partially collapsed, and I was unconscious. And I was 23 years old. At the time, I was kind of going down what I know now was just the wrong path. I was definitely living a life for other people. I was living the life that I thought people wanted me to live. I was living the image of myself, not really who I was. And so on the impact, when I was unconscious, I had a vision. It was my life, but it wasn't the life I was living. It was the life that I came to live. I know now that I was getting a glimpse into what was possible for this lifetime. And I saw, like a movie in front of my mind's eyes, all the people that I loved, people who loved me. I saw that I was teaching, that I was writing. I saw my partner, who I'm with now, and we have 2 kids. It was clear as day, but the love, the feeling that I had inside my chest was so powerful that it stayed with me to this day. It was like a love I'd never experienced before. A love with no opposites, a love that had no conditions. And I didn't know what to call it back then because I had no points of reference for that kind of love. Love growing up was conditional, and it was a transaction, right? If I could be something for you, then I'll get your attention. If you need me, then, I get attention and I'm loved. But there was always these conditions. It was never free. And I was never free when I was being loved. And so I woke up the next day in the hospital, and I knew that what happened was really important. And I promised myself that I would change my ways, but I didn't know really how to start. I had no points of reference for even a spiritual experience, because at the time I was in academia, I was working on my PhD, and everything that I identify with, was up here. My logic, my intellect, my capacity to be very smart, very driven. And so everything like below the neck, I had no idea that that in this temple, there was such magic and such power and such truth. And so that was like kind of the biggest turning point in my life, where I knew that I had to realign. I had to find a way to merge those two lives, the one that I was living and the one that I saw that night in the accident. And it was about 5 years later where I was living with pain in my sinuses. And so it lasted 2 years. I would, every day I would wake up and I'd have pain in my face, pain in my head. And then, I'd go to bed at night and this last thing I would think about, pain. And if someone who's listening knows what it is to live with chronic pain every day, eventually it just kind of takes your joy away. It takes your enthusiasm for life and makes you feel depressed. And so I'd seen like all the specialists. I'd seen, I changed my diet. I got chiropractic adjustments. I got acupuncture. I had like x-rays, like everything, and nothing would work. And so, and I was working on my, finishing my thesis. And so one day my mother-in-law said, I think you'd love this workshop. It's called Women in Leadership. And I think you'd like to come. And I thought, oh, Women in Leadership. My intellect loved that title. I was already pretty bossy as a person. And one day I would graduate and probably, maybe become head of the department. So Women in Leadership sounded good to my intellect. But Brian, if I knew what was going to happen in that workshop, I never would have gone. So I walk into this workshop and there's about 12 women sitting in a circle, and the teacher's talking about a very different kind of leadership. She's talking about a leadership that comes from emotions and comes from deep intuition and our attention and our breath deep inside the body. And the more she's talking, the more the women in the room just start crying like spontaneously, and nobody seems to be bothered by it. And I'm sitting there and I don't understand what she's talking about. I have no idea. And the more she's talking, the more the women are crying, the more the pressure in my head is just rising and rising and rising. And I'm just waiting for her to take a little break in her talking so that I can excuse myself, go to the washroom, and never come back. Mm-hmm. She never took a break. And she looked at me and she said, Anne, are you okay? She could tell I was like a pressure cooker, and the pain was getting worse and worse. And I could hear my heart when she asked that question. I could feel my heart saying please tell her you're not okay. Tell her you're not okay. And my head was like, don't you dare. If you say a word, you're going to lose control. We can't help you. And so I said, no, I'm okay. Move on to the next person. And she said, Anna, I invite you to take a deep, deep breath. And again, my heart was like, please take that breath. And my head was like, don't, you cannot do this. This is not safe. My whole body was like, mayday, mayday, get out of there. And I did. I took this deep instinctual because my whole body was saying do not, but it was a deeply intuitive breath in through the nose. And as I breathe out, I'm the one in this same thing, mess of snot and tears and the sounds that are coming out of my mouth and the shaking, and my body's shaking, it's trembling, I'm hot, I'm cold. It looks like a spectacle in my mind, but really the other women don't even seem to be bothered by it at all. This tsunami of emotion just comes through me and just crashes, and it takes my whole body. And she even comes over and she puts her hand on my back and she says, this is what happens when someone's kept 28 years of emotional baggage in their body. She was making an example out of me. And so I just kind of try to catch my breath and settled, and then suddenly my whole body felt calm. Mm-hmm. And it was really, really, really still. And the feeling that I had was similar to the car accident. Like, it was just tremendous peace. And the pain was completely gone. And it's been 17 years and it hasn't come back at all.
Wow.
And so what happened that day is I figured how. In the accident was the what, and then that day was the how. My body was the key. My body is the biological processor of energy and information, whether it's the past traumas and conditioning and experiences that we've had, that integrated into the cells of our bodies, into our nervous system, into our organs or fascia. And its capacity to process energy and information is so much greater than our intellect. But we have learned to live up in our heads, right? As a protection, we try to keep ourselves safe from the environment that we think is unsafe because of our conditioning and the environments of our childhood. And so that day I came home. I came home to myself. I discovered that, and which is what we know from epigenetics now, that, the cells in the body, they integrate and they register the environment, people's emotions, what happens to you, and they do it for an intelligent reason. We have to survive the environments that we're in as children. And so we don't want to blame the body for doing that. We want to thank the body. Thank you so much for doing that. But now it's different. Now we're safe. Now we're in a different environment. So those two experiences were changed my life.
Well, I can completely relate. I mean, it reminds me of my interview with Anita Morjani. I had a near-death experience as well. And if I could just put that into a pill and give it to some other person, that moment where you think back on your life and you have that loving feeling and you realize what you've been doing up to this point is not really what you should have been doing or meant to do. And you have a different purpose. It's such a powerful thing. I'm sure you're grateful that you had this car accident, right? Because it transformed.
Now I am.
Right. I hear that. So let's talk about what you mean by burning out. Everybody probably sort of has a different interpretation of this. Of course, everybody is experienced. You're doing some work that's monotonous and you get tired of it. But your reference for burning out, explain what you mean by that.
So for me, burnout is a crisis in meaning. And if we want a solution that's going to last and that's going to be sustainable, we have to look at it through the lens of spirituality. That a spiritual solution to burnout addresses the roots of why we are depleting ourselves, why we are giving more than we have, why we are overgiving, why we are letting other people take so much from us, why we stay in these situations that are draining, why we stay in these relationships that are draining. So for me, I mean, burnout can be, people can burn out from overdoing it or, not taking enough time for themselves. But those solutions, like after you address it at that level, something else will come up, because the roots of the reason why we are so fatigued are deeper. They're deeper than these like kind of superficial solution. So what I've discovered is, even when you're on your spiritual path, even when you're 2 feet on the path, you can still burn out. Because we, those of us who are of service, who are empaths, who are highly sensitive people, and know that they're here to be light workers, and know that they're here to serve and to help and to guide and to inspire. Often we have learned from our environment how to put our needs second, how to help other people or to be needed in order to belong or to be loved. And so that reason for serving is not a good reason enough. Eventually we will want to throw in the towel and not do it anymore. And we need all the light workers we
Yeah.
can have right now. But I'm seeing them, including myself, and I wrote the book for myself,
Right.
getting so disillusioned and tired and resentful, to be honest, as well.
I could see I had naturally gone through a lot of your exercises because, I get a question, Brian, how do you do this all the time? You're like a machine. And, I absolutely love to be of service so much, especially selfless service. I have unlimited reservoirs of energy when it comes to that. And so, I look back, I didn't think I could overgive. But before, when I had not done the work, and it was about the intention, I'm going to do this so I can get something in return, or I want to feel that love. When I'm doing it just purely selflessly, not even thinking about anything in return, is when the reservoir of energy is unlimited. So that's kind of, do you understand what I'm trying to say? Is like, when I'm in service in that, and when I'm, the only time I start to get fatigue is when I'm not being of service. I desperately want to get back to that where I'm being of service. I feel like I'm wasting my time. Does that make sense? Like maybe I'm burning out from not being in service, right? So when I'm in service, I'm in the flow and there is unlimited energy. And I don't think I can necessarily overgive. We overgive when we're doing it for different reasons. Explain what you mean by overgiving. Can I overgive?
Yes. And so if your identity is tied to service, then that's not pure. Okay. It's not the core essence of who you are. Okay. So some people will be of service because other people need them. Right. And I was one of those people because I realized that I was needed by my mom my whole life. And so when I was needed, I knew who I was. When I was needed, I was loved. So the need to be needed eventually will burn you out. You can't be of service from that place. And so that was my identity. When it comes to what you're describing, like if the identity of who you are is based in service, it's still not it, right? Okay. Like, so if you were able to be yourself and nobody needed you, actually, nobody needed the information, nobody, I don't know what else you do for work, for service, but nobody needed your medicine anymore. The world was healed, right? Who are you? Beyond service. And that's the biggest question in the book, is your fulfillment beyond service is so important, because through your fulfillment, your own personal spiritual light fulfillment, your gifts increase and your capacity to help others grow. Right. And you discover new medicine that you didn't know you had. Do you see what I mean? So it's kind of breaking down the box or the concept of ourselves that is limited by our conditioning, even though it's a new, expanded identity. I am a spiritual coach, or I am whatever it is. It always needs to be addressed so that we can come back to that purity and that innocence that we are, and that we are enough, even if we don't do anything.
One thing that you say in the book that resonated with me is that you're going to attract people to you. You may solve problems in your own life because you go through a period where you're trying to resolve conflicts, and you fulfill these things within yourself. Then you start to be of service. You attract people that went through the same things as basically you. You'll find that you have a lot of people coming to you that have been through all the same little issues and problems. So we have to go through that process of self-fulfillment in order to be of service. We can't go directly to the point of service if we haven't gone through that self journey, right?
Absolutely. And it is a life journey, so it never ends.
It
And so
never ends.
we continue to get an opportunity to go up the rings of the spiral. So I see it like a spiral going upward like this, right?
Mhm.
And so, and then this line that goes up the spiral that goes kind of perpendicular, I guess, or yeah, to the, or goes up through the spiral is is that conditioned belief that you came here to learn about. And so
Right.
the first time you go around it, so for me, like it was around like unconditional love and the mother, right? And so the first time that I did some healing around that, I was on that first ring of the spiral, and I wrote the book, my first book, Be Feel Think Do, you know. And
Mhm.
then when the second time, when I was on the next ring of the spiral and a mother issue comes up, my thought was, I've done this. I wrote the book. Like, why is this showing up again? So a lot of people, when they start to hit that next step, they feel like they're regressing, or they feel like they're, you know, going backwards, and they get hard on themselves. But this is the path for the rest of our lives. But every time we go into a more expanded context and more expanded ring of the spiral. And so when we go up the spiral, the people who are going through the first rings are the people who we attract every single time. People who go, oh, you know, their reality that they're projecting outside matches your reality because you're emitting a different signal than you used to, right? Because your reality is shifting inside because of the healing, the transformation you've gone through.
Mhm.
So people say, well, who's going to come? Who are going to be my clients? Who do I want to attract? It's actually quite organic. People will start to show up because energetically you are attracting the people who are ready to move through this next step of their evolution and their transformation. So, you know, people say, oh, I can't be a spiritual teacher, I can't be a spiritual coach because I haven't healed everything. Well, that just won't ever happen.
Right.
Like, if you were to heal everything, you'd ascend, and then there would be no reason to be here.
Right.
We're supposed to walk alongside each other and help each other
Right.
come back home.
Something that you mentioned in the book a lot is the core essence. It's a big part of our path. So explain what you mean by that. What is the core essence?
Your core essence is who you were before you were born and who you will continue to be once you pass away from this human experience. And so it is the essence, your unique signature as a soul that chose to incarnate in this body, in this lifetime, at this time in history. Mm-hmm. Your core essence is very easily accessible when you're a young child, right? Like there's this integration of who you are when you're very young because the world hasn't crept in yet. And so there is a memory in the body of how that feels to be in complete alignment with your core essence, with who you really are. And so the kind of the centerpiece of the book is about connecting with that inner child, connecting with that inner child who is wounded from having been, you know, left back there a long time ago, and also with the power and the gifts that that child holds. Because in protection from the environment, the child also protected the gifts and the power and the new medicine that is for you to share with the world. And so when we show up in the world and we show up in service from that place of core essence, then we don't burn out. We are clear. We have very good boundaries. We feel fulfilled. We feel enthusiastic and excited, and we feel creative. Mm-hmm. We are in the flow of our soul. We're aligned and in the flow of the light of our soul.
I understand that, and that makes sense to me. You also, in the same reference, you talk about embodiment. So you mean what you're embodying the core essence. As you mentioned at the beginning, the intelligence of the body, and when we access that intelligence, it takes away that burnout. Correct?
Yes. So the way to reconnect and reclaim and own the core essence through the inner child is through the body. It's the only way. You cannot intellectually find enlightenment. You cannot intellectually heal. It has to go through the body. In Huna, which is the spirituality of the ancient Hawaiians, they talk about the three selves, the higher selves, the middle self, and the lower self. And I trained with a kahuna there in Lemurian Huna a long time ago. And one of the big teachings is that you cannot know source through the middle self, which is the intellect. You can only know source through the lower self, which is the body. And so in their tradition, the body is directly connected to your higher self, is directly connected to source. And so the way that soul and source and higher self communicates to you is through sensations, through colors, through images. It's abstract. It's not thoughts. It's not full sentences. It's actually through the abstract communication of your inner world.
So what do you say to the high intellectual that is of service, that's always of the mind? How can they or do you have some exercise in here? How can they shift from that intellectual mind-based perspective and move to the body to enter into that core essence?
Well, I mean, there's a few exercises. The first few exercises in the book are mostly about getting into your body. So I use different tools to help the reader, and all of the meditations and exercises and journeys are on my website. They're recorded as audios and videos, so you can read them in the book, but you can also get them for free on my website, by the way, because it might be easier to just listen to them. And so that would be one way that I would recommend. But another way that, what worked for me was to seek these uncomfortable situations, right? Like to go into contexts and environments where your limits are pushed and where you can feel your heart calling you. But it's so different and it's so strange. So like for me, going to that leadership workshop, it's almost like the universe tricked me, but there was something guiding me to my own heart, right? Something was pushing me to go and explore something different. I wouldn't have necessarily gone, but it's listening to these calls. The universe calls. We hear it in our hearts. Like we yearn, we long to come home to our own heart. And so even somewhat, and the intellect is brilliant. Like I'm not bashing the intellect, because I am still, very much appreciative of my capacity to write books and to, contemplate these big questions. But what happens is that your intellect then becomes a servant to your heart, as opposed to the other way around. You can lead your life with that deep connection to your heart, which connects you to your soul. It connects you to intuition and your deep, deep, deep knowing and your medicine, and then still have your brilliant intellect serve your soul. It's still there. It's just that the way down into the body is so counter everything we were taught in school, in life, we were modeled. So at the beginning, it might feel a little strange, a little different, but it is the most incredible journey you can take. It's an intimate relationship with yourself.
Now, you talk a little bit about manifestation along these lines in the book, and you talk about affirmations, saying, most of the time, if you're just repeating the affirmation, it's not really going to be effective unless you are coming from that core essence, attaching those emotional energies to what you're saying, right?
Oh, you cut there a little bit.
All right. All right. But actually, you have to just attach to the core essence while you're doing these affirmations, the energetic and emotional feelings for them to be effective. Explain what you mean by that.
Yes. So I'm sure you've seen it too, a lot of spiritual bypassing that's happening right now, especially online and social media. I mean, it's kind of trendy to talk the talk, but so when there's a misalignment between what you say in your affirmation and what your body carries, it won't work. It will actually create more pressure, and the dissonance can actually make you feel more sick. And so it's really important to connect with what's there already in your body. So let's say I want financial abundance, because often that's what, people think about that and they're like, nah, that's not spiritual. I don't think I want to ask for that. But we think about it, right? So, okay, let's say we want financial abundance. And we say these affirmations, but inside of us, there's a feeling of scarcity. There's a memory of scarcity from our ancestry, from our soul history, from our childhood, whatever it is. Then we won't be able to have your whole energetic body and those words be in resonance. So what we want to do, so besides doing the healing around the scarcity, which is another, endeavor on its own, we want to go in and really connect with the abundance we do have. Okay, so let's say I feel very fortunate because I have a great relationship with my children, right? Let's say that's where I know there's incredible abundance. And so I bring the feeling and the state of being that is in alignment with that. I feel the gratitude for the abundance that I have in that relationship, because a lot of people suffer in their relationship with their kids. And so I'm grateful that there's abundance in my life there. And so I feel that. And when I feel it in my body, I say, I am abundant. I am abundance itself. And my whole body believes it because it's true. So now there's no dissonance. You're in absolute resonance. I am abundance. And so when I say that, I actually start to bring abundance to me. Very different.
Right. The feeling is clearly the secret, but how do we help people that can't feel that abundance? They know that the feeling is key, and even if they're not saying it, but they just can't bring up a feeling of abundance in their body. Are you saying it's always there somewhere if we search for it?
So there is something you feel abundant about. And when I have clients who say, I can't remember anything I feel abundant about, I can't find any event or person where I am deeply connected to that space of love and gratitude, then usually an animal does it. So if a pet, and I have an exercise in the book where we bring up on the stage, because one of the tools that I use is the theater of the mind. We bring up a pet, and really usually that always works. So is there a pet in your life that you feel gratitude for the connection you have and how you feel when you're in their presence, that feeling? And then you can say, I am abundant. And even if it's a memory, see if you can conjure it back up, the feeling in your heart center. And once you have it about that memory, say, I am that.
I like that. So you talk about empaths in the book, and I encounter this a lot, and even I guess with myself, you reach a level of empathy that can actually kind of work against you. I feel emotions like a sponge. I'll walk into a Walmart and I need to put on an astronaut suit or something, because I can feel the emotions all around me, and I'm in that high sensitive place, but I'm taking in perhaps energies I don't want to. So do you have ways that I can access my empathic resources without it being or without it working against me? Do you understand what I'm trying to ask?
Absolutely. And there's two things I can recommend here. So the first thing is the situation in a Walmart that you describe would be a metaphor for someone who takes your energy. So it would represent a relationship you have in your life, maybe from your past, or maybe you still have that relationship in your life now, where you somehow have decided that you can give as much as they need and they can take as much as they need because there's a rule that they're an exception or something like that. So they represent an unhealed wound from having to be in the presence of someone who is toxic. So that would be the first one. So it'd be to look at the root of the Walmart metaphor, right? Who is that person? And maybe that person's not in your life anymore, but somehow they're still bringing up this pattern that is attracting a different situation. And it usually is around boundaries. The second one is if you show up in that core essence, anywhere you go, everywhere you go, moment to moment, that you're actually connected to your power. You're not in your intellect, you're actually below the neck, maybe in your belly or in your heart, your attention and your deep breath is there. And your cup is full. You feel full. So your light from that place shines. And so when that happens, you're not, nothing can come in. You can't take in the negative and the toxic or the intensity of other people's emotion because you're shining from that core essence. And there's an exercise in the book called Core Star, which is a really powerful exercise to help you build that shining out so that nothing can come in. And so those two things would be what I would recommend in that situation, because you're right that empathy and your high sensitivity are really important. They're gifts. And so finding ways to create those boundaries through the healing of the original wound, or showing up in the fullness that you are, as opposed to kind of up and out of ourselves, then, would change your experience.
Am I losing some of the advantages of that empathy? I mean, I can be with somebody I know, I can tell they're depressed. They might not show any body language, and I'm not attracting them. You know what I mean? Just because somebody's in my environment, I don't necessarily think I attracted them, but I can tell. And if I have that where the light's coming out, I'm kind of blocking a little bit that sensitivity to their depression or sadness. I'm not necessarily aware of it. I guess I can transform, but do you understand what I'm trying to say? Is I don't want to lose that power, because it does help me to help others when I am aware of their emotions. At the same time, I don't want to embody it in my body.
Yeah, so psychologists make the difference between cognitive empathy and emotional empathy. And so what you're describing is emotional empathy, where there's contagion of emotion. So in order for you to feel the other person's emotion and to be in their emotion with them, you're actually out of yourself. You're not in your power. And so there is a misunderstood empathy is misunderstood that way, is that if you're in your power and you're connected to your core essence and you're breathing deeply and you're full and you're not feeling what they're feeling, we think that we won't be powerful enough, or we will lose that capacity, but we really don't. We actually are going to hear what we need to hear to help the person, not what we think we have to hear to help the person. So embodied leadership, embodied service, and embodied empathy is making our core light the priority. And then other people, when they're in our presence, we are in reverence for the more that they are, as opposed to in their problems with them. It's a huge difference.
Right.
And so it feels like we are not loving them because we don't feel their depression. But when we feel their depression, we're actually betraying ourselves. And we actually are not holding them in the more that they can be. We can't be in their depression and also be in reverence for the light that they are. When you stand in the light, in the reverence for the light that they are, what they need, what they really truly need at their soul level will be provided by you. It just won't be the same way that you've been helping people with depression, for example.
Okay. So yeah, you mentioned embodied leadership, and that is, explain a little bit more about that, because that's, you kind of hit that in your final chapter, and throughout the book. We can reach embodied leadership, and explain a little bit more about what you mean by that.
Mm-hmm. So an embodied leader is someone who owns everything that moves through them and doesn't project them onto other people.
Mm-hmm.
An embodied leader is someone who has done the healing and the transformation and is always curious and ready to take on the next layer of their own evolution, so that when people are around them, there's an authenticity and a vulnerability and a truth to them. An embodied leader needs only her or his presence to transform a room. There's nothing to do, nowhere to go, but just be. So the quality of your embodied presence is actually what impacts the world. And so often there's less to say.
Mm-hmm.
There's more to just be in attunement with the environment. And then an embodied leader serves from a place of empowerment, serves from a place of core essence and of spiritual path, and knows that what they didn't get as children, like the things that they wanted from their parents and they never got, like that thing they didn't get, is their gifts to the world. That it's through the healing and the reclaiming that they can share that gift with the world. Very different kind of leadership than we've been modeled. It's one that has boundaries to protect the innocence and the purity of people, including ours first and foremost. So the way that we address and talk to the wound inside of us is with compassion and with kindness and with deep love, like the mother we always wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And then through that, we get to really stand in our power in the presence of other people.
Are there ways to know if I'm suffering from burnout and don't know it? I mean, it can be a subtle thing, right?
Yeah, you can. I know for me, because, I'm a Capricorn type A, like, my intellect is strong. So I know that I can miss signs, absolutely all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think back in March, like I woke up at midnight and had a panic attack. And I'm thinking, like, I have nothing to be stressed about. Like, and I love my life. What is happening? And so I think that what's really important is to know that the body never lies.
Mm-hmm.
It never lies. And so when it talks to you in subtle ways, like, a panic attack is like, okay, something's up. So I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to spend more time below the neck. I'm going to do some breathing. I'm going to do some deep contemplation work, because I know something, if I continue this way, something is going to have to give. And so I don't have to wait until the whole house crumbles down, right? I can listen to my body when it starts to give me these little signals. So it is possible. And I think that if you're in a place where you don't feel burnt out, but there's these little things that your body's telling you, then it's a gift. You're in a great place, because you don't have to wait for burnout, a full burnout,
Right.
For you to hit the wall completely, to know that it's time for a new invitation to go deeper into yourself. It's always an invitation for the more that we're becoming. So it's never a punishment. It's a gift. Yeah.
What do we say to the people that are watching that are in jobs they hate, but they feel like they have no choice, and they're burned out, and they'll tell you, I'm burned out, but I don't know what to do. It's, this is what I've been doing for 2 decades, and I'm burned out, but I need to take care of my family. That's a different level. It's not really about, they might be working at a job that's not really service oriented, but a little bit is, everybody can be of service to some extent. What do we say to them, that level of burnout, the stock market trader, or somebody working in the bank, or the cash register, and they know they're burned out, but they feel their choices in the world are limited? How do we help them?
So the book starts with step number 1, which is to create space. And so even if it's to start every morning with a practice of deep breathing, in through the nose and out through the mouth. So 4 counts in, 6 counts out through the mouth, and the nose and the mouth are very important. That's a ha breath from the Lemurian Huna tradition. And even if you do this for 5 minutes, you're laying in bed, you just realize you're awake, you haven't gotten up yet, and you focus your attention to this deep breath, that will start to create space inside yourself, which will create space outside yourself little by little. So right now, if you're in this situation, you can't see another way. There's no other way. And so you feel trapped, you feel stuck. And so starting to create space inside will start to create more possibilities outside of yourself. And so the first step of this transformational process is to take time, is to, even if it's 5 minutes, and I know, and then I say, there's all these different retreats you can do for yourself, like the 3-hour retreat or the 1-week retreat, but the first one is 5 minutes. It could be 3 minutes. And so building this rapport, this intimacy with your own inner world and your emotions will really shift this reality that you feel stuck in. And I talk about it in the second chapter. I talk about how, the excuses that we make, and it's not to be hard on ourselves or to say it's all excuses. It's not. Sometimes we don't have a choice. Absolutely. But it's interesting to just look at the same old objections that we have to take time for ourselves and see if that actually comes from a long, long time ago. And it could be a pattern that we could interrupt, because it's never what it's about, I say. We think it's about the job, the family, but it's not. It's all comes from the original wounds that we carry from either childhood, our ancestry, or our past lives.
One thing I get a lot of messages about are people that want to be of service, that feel like they hate their job or their situation they're in because they're not being of service. So, and how do we address that? This craving to be of service, but a lack of clarity on what actually to do.
So this book is absolutely for them
Mhm.
because it is a journey back home to who you really are. And so uncovering the layers, decloaking yourselves from the self-image, from the conditioned, and allowing yourself to really remember who you really are is a healing process. It's an uncovering process. And the 7-step process of this book will definitely help people like that, because at the end of the day, because burnout is a crisis in meaning, it's all about, why are we here? Why are we born at this time in history? There's such an intelligence to that question and that answer, and that it will bring you to the medicine that you have to share with the world in that unique way that you can serve and be of service and be a light worker. And we need you.
Well, that leads me to the question, as somebody that helps people on a regular basis, working with spirituality, I would like to get your idea of what's happening on the planet as a whole on a larger scale from your perspective. Is there a shift happening? Do you see an awakening happening?
Absolutely. There's a huge shift happening. We are in an accelerated time that we've never seen before on Earth. And so when we used to be able to hold on to an identity or to even a job, like for 10, 30, 40 years, now it feels like every week we're asked to create ourselves anew, to change our minds. And it's important for everybody to know that it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to wake up in the morning and say, who am I today? Because that is the nature of this acceleration, is that it's changing so fast that we have to decloak and heal and remember as faster than we ever have. We've chosen to come here at this time in history. We chose to, so we weren't sent to learn a lesson. We weren't sent because, we needed to, I don't know, like have our sins be like forgiven or whatever. We came because we are light forces, like light sources, light beings, and we wanted to be part of this acceleration. And we wanted to forget that we were light beings and light sources, so that when we remembered, we'd be so powerful when we taught it. It would be like authentic and real. So just like Wayne Dyer used to say, like, when consciousness put him in an orphanage and gave him an absent father so he could learn self-reliance for himself, by himself, like through and through, because that's what his soul wanted to come here to teach. And so to understand that, and I talk about this in the book, to understand that there's an incredible intelligence for you to have chosen the family you've chosen, to be here at this time. And a lot of souls are not human souls. They're from light sources and stars and other air places in the universe. And we were born in families who are very much humans. Human souls. And so, we think, like, I feel misunderstood. I feel like I'm the only one doing this work. Like, why is it so lonely to be a light worker? Well, this is normal. So don't be hard on yourself if you look around and you're like, I'm the only one. It's actually part of the process, is for you to own this life, and to believe your intuition, to believe your body when it speaks to you, and to believe when your soul speaks to you through your body. It's what we need right now as this great awakening is happening.
Beautifully said. But at the same time, as you become aware of your desire to serve others, you can see a sort of pattern or movement in the same illusion that we're in now, of people that are into serving just themselves. That's the service that their focus is upon. You can almost see a duality in the world, where there's those who are serving others, and there's those that that have a love of only the self. What are your feelings on that, and our interactions with those that are only serving the self? We can love them, we can understand them. We don't want to get into a conflict with them, but it's obviously a part of the experience that we have.
Yes. And I think they're here to teach us how to put boundaries.
Right.
They're here to show us that we can love them from a divine place, but we don't have to like them, and we don't have to be with them, and we don't have to spend time with them. And that's really important.
We don't have to like them. We can love them, but we don't have to like them.
Exactly. And that's okay. And if we have children and we model to them that it's okay to not be around people who just take and take and take, and people who don't have your best interest at heart, or don't have the best interest of the greater good at heart. It's okay. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means that your divine self-love for yourself and for your service and for the people who want to grow is more important than them being comfortable. Right? We have to be okay with people being uncomfortable with us saying no, or putting a boundary, or
And just a final question, I just always like to ask, somebody do you have a certain routine, a ritual that you go through the day? How do you start your day? What are the general things that have helped you on your spiritual path, the different habits or rituals?
So I definitely wake up every morning and do the Ha breath. So I'm in bed, and as soon as I'm aware that I'm awake, instead of letting like the to-do list, or letting everything from yesterday creep back into my head, I stop it and I take 10 minutes to do the Ha breath. So in through the nose, out through the mouth. And now attention is not in my thoughts, it's in my chest, it's in my heart, it's in the center of my heart chakra. And I just do that for the first 10 minutes. And then it tells my body that I'm a priority, like as in my inner world's a priority, my light's a priority. And then I go about my day, and I say hourly, I remember to come back home. Mm-hmm. So, I'll be at a red light, deep breath. And, if I'm kind of into sutras at the time, I'll do a sutras, but really just I am is enough for me, like has such a strong resonance now, like just I am, and just feeling the fullness of being here now in this moment. It's so beautiful. I'm so grateful. And so hourly, whatever I'm doing, I always remind myself to be home, so that 80% of my day at least is spent with my attention deep inside my body. And I used to think that if I lived from here, that I wouldn't be able to do my job and be a mom but it's not true. That's the ego saying like, I need you to not, go down here because it's too scary. But living from a place of deep presence in the body, you can still do everything and more, and you have a lot of energy. So those two things keep me connected.
The heart is more intelligent. It
yes.
has more intelligence. So
absolutely.
Dr. Berube, thank you so much for coming on. Everybody needs to read the Burnout Antidote. It's an amazing book, and it's going to speak to you. I know a lot of people that watch my program are interested in service. They're going through the same issues. They're struggling. And a lot of this is really going to help out. There's some amazing exercises. I can't recommend it enough. So thank you so much for coming on, and welcome to the Reality Revolution.
Thank you, Brian, for having me.